I'd first like to thank everyone for coming. And I would also like to thank the panelists for participating on this panel. This few housekeeping. So first, we will be recording this to share with people who were not able to join. And we also like everyone to stay on mute if you're not on the panel. But besides that, let's get to it. So the Good Chat. First of all, I'd like to do a quick review of the Good Chat. So the Good Chat is our way as tribute to engage with everyone like we usually would if we were in the shops as, normal, but we are not, but we still like to keep in touch with our customers and our audience in general. But this Good Chat, we are talking about the Performative Fashion Show. The Performative Fashion Show is reflecting on the fashion industry's response to the current racial movement, Black Lives Matter. What I'm seeing is that they're in a tug of war between the past and the future, and they provide a showcase of statements on social media, but that's not going to subsidize the decades of inequity in the industry. So what we're discussing today is it enough? Like, it's not if it's enough, but if what they're saying, is it going to be just a trend, or are they actually going to walk the talk this time? So today I have a lovely panel of people. First, I'd like to introduce Brian Lamont. He's a stylist / personal shopper and on-air fashion personality. Then we have Joy Kingsley-Ibeh. She's founder of Kingsley Model and Talent Management. And next we have Jason Barnes, performance artist, artist overall, and fashion historian. And next we have Jacklyn Laryea, co-founder and creative director at Tribute. I will be moderating this whole conversation, and I'd like to open it up for everyone on the panel to answer just one question. Will the fashion industry finally take a deep dive into changing for the better? So who wants to jump on that one first?
I'll jump in. I'm Jason. That is a hard question to ask or answer because we just have to watch and we have to see. I really hope so, but also there's been a lot of change happening leading up to like the Black Lives Matter full movement that's happening now. There's been a lot of change that's happening, a lot of like African-American designers, African designers, just people of color in general, having more of a presence in the fashion industry. There's still a long way to go, but it's definitely way more than was in like, even like 2007, 2010. So there has been a lot of change, but we shall see, yeah.
What do you think? Or Jacklyn, you could go.
No, Joy, go for it.
Oh, I forgot I was muted. No, I agree with Jason in that regard. We are in a wait and see period, and I think it's going to be the same way the movement is. And I think all of us on this panel can probably say that we have seen a lot of our white colleagues, our white peers are taking a deeper look into themselves right now and trying to understand what role they have played in, maybe they weren't overtly racist, but what impact their silence meant, what impact they're letting racist comments just go by the wayside. And so I do believe the fashion industry has come a long way, and but it needs to do better. And the fashion is a feel-good industry, right? It makes you feel good. It's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be about beauty and fun and lifestyle, but it can't be limited to just one sect of people, And so, as Jason said, I do hope that it changes. I do hope that they're speaking out. When you have, for what it's worth, whether Anna Wintour was given lip service or not, we've never heard Anna make a comment about race, right? Mm-hmm. But this has forced people on so many levels to have to say something, And now that she had said something, we can now hold her accountable for those words, So maybe that's going to be change coming up.
Jacklyn, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I agree with both of you, and I feel like this is probably going to be a theme throughout this conversation, a lot of agreeing.
We'll
One thing I want to add to what's already been said is that the question is interesting. There's also the reality that the fashion industry has to face, which is the Black consumer market, that has historically been going along with and not necessarily standing up when we do feel excluded, when we are very like responsible for purchasing, putting money into the pockets of white, predominantly white brands. So at this point, I think the Black consumer market is also realizing our value, realizing that we can choose which brands we support. We can choose to put our money into Black-owned businesses or into businesses that reflect our community, our beliefs. So I think that's also something that the fashion industry is going to have to reckon with.
Reckon with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
As she said, we're going to agree a lot.
Yeah, I agree as well. I guess coming from like a stylist standpoint, like during the difficult times that we're going through and the challenging times, you know, whether it's COVID-19, the first thing, and then like now this has been going on for years, but you know, just supporting Black people in general. But as stylists, we're going through a lot. Like I know, like for me, like a lot of my clients, they weren't doing a lot of things. We weren't as busy. We weren't doing like photo shoots in person. But I think now, like a lot of brands, particularly Black brands, are when we're thinking outside the box, as we normally are, right, we're a little bit more to think really outside the box and just put ourselves out there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I kind of want to start to the beginning. So with Jason, Brian, and Joy, since you guys are really either have had a long career in the fashion industry, I want to know what drew you towards fashion in the first place. Wants to start that off?
For me, it was, you know, for me, my story, it started with a tragic situation. My family, we migrated to this country from Nigeria by way of London. And when we moved to Maryland, shortly thereafter, my father was murdered. And so I found fashion as a place to escape. You know, it was a place I can go and kind of get away from that reality. And I remember I might have been 12 or 13 years old when I saw Naomi Campbell on the cover of the September issue of Vogue magazine, which was huge. And even as a freshly new African person to America, I knew that was huge, you know, that was a big deal that a Black woman was on the cover. And so ever since that moment, you know, I mean, she's been my modeling idol since that day. And it was the thing that drew me into fashion. And then as I was traveling throughout my life, and I found my eyes were open to just how fashion varied from country to country, from state to state. And so even as a wardrobe stylist, you know, a lot of my style, a lot of my personal style, a lot of what I do for my clients and do for editorials and things like that are truly influenced by my world traveling and just my African influence. And so, you know, I try to put a touch of that in there, but fashion really came from a dark place for me and it brought me out.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Joy.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah, so for me, I came from a small town in North Carolina called Henderson, and it was in the middle of nowhere. So like an hour away from like the nearest shopping mall. No, like nobody's like, we didn't know about like design, like big designers and stuff like that. What I know now, we didn't have access to like, you know, a lot of grocery stores and stuff. It was just so small. So just for me, branching out and coming to DC, going to school and stuff was just a learning process. So fashion for me was an escape for me as well. Like from just not doing things that were like normalized back home. And I guess like expression too, because a lot of people in the South are known to be like stereotypical, especially in the gay community. Like a lot of people, well, towards the gay community, they'll judge you for what you have on or how you present yourself and things. So like fashion, I've always like looked the part, even if it was like going to, in high school, middle school, even in college. Like I always looked the part, but I never took people's like opinions over me. And I just know that I knew one day that I was gonna be something. And still like today, I'm like, I'm gonna be something, whether in fashion or maybe like the media or something. But like fashion also is like a learning process as well. Cause like I'm new in the game, but a lot of people that have been in the industry, or people that I've encountered, like I learned so much from them. Like maybe like Joy, she's from a different country, but I visited these places, but like to actually talk and interact with these people, like I think I would have never met these type of people if I never would have moved from North Carolina. That was just for me. So fashion has done a lot for me.
For me, I think it's like a mix of both of you guys. Like I grew up in DC and in Maryland. I had a very hard life, not hard life, but it's always tough being like the most gay kid, not even just a gay kid, but like the most gay kid, like can't hide from it, can't escape it, out the womb, super gay. And so fashion was that not only escape, it was a way of communicating. I grew up in a very like privileged existence, like with the amount of money around me. And so it was also another way of like escaping and like being able to like kind of like communicate with people in a way so that they understood, by being kind of peacockish and learning when and when not to do that at a very young age. And so like, you know, all of that glamour and all that kind of stuff with fashion hit me at a very early age, but it was more as like a function and almost like a weapon dealing with so much like backlash for just being gay, you know, so.
Yeah, I see a theme here where fashion's just a, first of all, expression for you guys, but it was also a way to like deal with things in life at the same time.
Sorry to interrupt. It's kind of a lifestyle, I think, for all of us here. You know, speaking like, it's not even like, oh, fashion is my passion kind of thing where people would always say that. Like, after a while, it's a lifestyle.
It's your life.
You know what I mean? Like, it's how you think. Like, you know, we're sitting in our houses for COVID, and I'm pretty sure we're all dressed still.
To the nine.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, like, my roommate, this would be the first time she would be, she's like, oh, you actually wear gowns in the house. I was like, yeah, I have a sweater caftan that I wear around the house. Because that's not only that's the full escape, you know what I mean? Like, you put that on, you're transported no matter what. No matter what's going on in the world, you're fully transported, so.
So true.
Yeah. I was back here going like,
right. Trust me, I have been on other Zoom calls and I'm always the most dressed one, you know, and I'm like, wait, you called after this call? Like, what?
Jacklyn, I have a question for you. So since you are co-founder of Tribute, which is a unique shopping retail space in DC, but you lived in New York before starting Tribute, what's the difference in the diversity of fashion retail businesses between New York and DC? Or even just the whole fashion retail experience, I'd say.
Ooh, I mean, I'm sure between all of us spend a lot of time in New York. I think the biggest difference for me is probably two things. The first is just the access to brick and mortars, the access to being able, like in New York, anything you see online, you can find somewhere, whether you have to go to Queens or you have to go to Long Island, you have to hit up the East Village, you can find that thing that you want somewhere in some district in New York. You can touch it, you can look at the colors, you can feel it, you can try it on. And I think that there's something so special about that experience. you know, growing up in like Joy, I'm from West Africa. I grew up in Ghana, and we take that one step further where you are so involved in your clothing. You choose the fabric yourself, you go to the tailor, you tell them how you want it. And I think that in New York, you still, I mean, you don't have that degree of interaction, but you're still able to experience the clothing and be around it. And for anybody who loves clothes and loves fashion, that's a huge part of the experience. Like when you buy things online, which I think is more prevalent in DC, and we actually did a focus group in DC before starting Tribute, and one of the biggest things that people said was like, I only shop online. Like I shop online because I can't really find the things that I want in person in DC. I have to like travel to New York or travel to Baltimore or travel to Philly to actually touch the clothing and see if I like it, see if it resonates with me, see if it's something I want in my wardrobe. So I think that's probably the biggest difference. And then the second thing is just the diversity of selection. You know, if you go to a shop in Crown Heights, the type of clothing, the type of shopping experience you're going to have is totally different than going to a shop in the Upper West Side or in Williamsburg.
Yeah, because I was gonna follow up, given like shopping experiences. I think we've all heard stories or even experienced ourselves as people of color where you've been kind of discriminated as a shopper.
Oh yeah.
I walk into stores.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's interesting that you say in different areas of New York there's like more lack.
Yeah. I used to live in Williamsburg. And I mean, there have been many experiences, but there's one in particular that I will never forget, which is going into like a small shop that sold jeans and asking if I could try on like a pair of jeans because they didn't have my size on the floor. And the saleswoman, who was like this super young white lady, very hipster, you know, Williamsburger. And I asked her to try on the jeans in my size. And she looked at me and she said, you know, these jeans are really expensive. Do you still want me to get your size? And I honestly, like, my heart is racing right now because I did not know what to say. I've had this experience like so many times, but there is a feeling of like being in a space that's supposed to be liberal. It's supposed to be filled with like woke white hipsters who are down, and having that experience happen there. And then funnily enough, my husband, who's on this call, who is white and French, also wanted to go to that same shop like the following week. And he went in and he like grabbed a pair of jeans and he was like, do you have this in a different color? And it was the same sales lady. And she was just like, oh yeah, like let me go. And I hadn't told him that story at that time. But it was just such a different experience. Like there was no question around whether or not he could afford, you know, a pair of jeans.
Well, that's really good point, because you're pointing at the fashion industry's focus. It's like the connection between money and race. And basically what's being insinuated is that the money is not in the Black community.
Yeah.
We'll ask that question. But we'll touch on that later on. But the next question I wanted to, and this is to whoever, any one of you guys, do we need to reset our standards for what fashion is? Because right now we're seeing kind of like a decomposing of fashion. So like people are just going back through the records of Vogue covers or whatever, or just even collections, and pointing out, whoa, like how did we let this slip, you know, of how blatantly racist that they were. So do we need to just reset our standards for what is fashion, what is, you know, what is beauty?
Mhm.
Uh,
I think. Oh, Jason,
oh no,
is
go
that
please,
you?
so please, please.
You'll take over too because you got some good points, I'm sure. So for me, I think that not only do we need to reset what fashion is, but we need to reset who's determining what fashion is. You know, because as we've discussed, you have people like Anna Wintour, who is the Bible, who everything she says is just the creme de la creme. And so it's that's fine if she's the one, but are we putting other people in that boardroom with her to say, okay, here's what you're missing. Here are designers that you aren't looking at, bringing other things to the table.
One of the things that when I think about racism in the fashion industry, I've always looked at it, well, it's a lot of people who are coming from Europe, who grew up in Europe, where the African American experience is not curriculum in high school. I mean, even in America, it's not really a priority, but it's not in their education. And some companies don't feel like it's not a European problem, it's just an American problem, so they don't have to address it fully. And so, like, what do you do with that mindset? How do you shift that from, because it starts internally, it starts in the company. It doesn't just, you don't just fix it on the outside. So how do you, what's your response to that kind of mentality?
Well, first of all, it's the reality of it is that the racism permeates through every country, every culture, everything. You know, there hasn't been a place that I've traveled on this earth that I have not experienced some form of racism outside of Africa, you know? And so it's it's just that they have to acknowledge it and stop thinking that it's an American problem, because it's not. Because the same thing that happened to you, Jacklyn, at the store has happened to me at the stores in Europe, of course, here in America. But, you know, and we all know when Oprah was discriminated against when she was in Paris shopping. And so when it's even happening to big name people, people with a face, with a known brand, you know, I think for us, I'm used to that. You know, we walk into a store and I hate that. The fact that I know I can walk into any store I want to now and I can buy whatever I want, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, does that white salesperson believe that, you know? And then I catch myself making sure my hands are all visible, that I haven't gone inside my purse,
Yeah.
so they don't think that I probably try to sneak something into my
Yeah.
purse. I'm 44 years
Yeah.
old and I still do that till this day, you
Yeah.
know? I feel very conscious of, like, are there cameras that they see me? I didn't do anything. I'm looking. And don't let me walk out of a store and not purchase anything. I'm like, crap, did they think I couldn't afford it, or did I think something? So, you know, the levels of what racism does to the Black community as a whole, just in our everyday lives, and then you take it further, what it's doing is stripping away people like us. Every single one of us on this panel has talked about how passionate we are about fashion, how much it is our part of our life. And then we step outside of that small safe space of ours, and then we're thrown into the masses where we're treated this way. So I think the Europeans have a huge responsibility to focus and make it a big deal, because by them, it's almost like when you hear people saying, oh, I don't see color. You're doing damage by saying that, you know? So they're saying, oh no, we don't see racism. That's an American issue. We're not killing Black people. But what you're doing is you're turning away people that want to support you. You're turning away people that want to come to your countries, that want to experience your fashion life, and that want to see things, you know? Jason, you talked about the fact that you lived in Paris, you know what I mean? So that's something you did because you're so passionate about who you are, your performance, your fashion. But, you know, there have been times that I have been hugely disappointed by the treatment that I've gotten abroad, you know? And,
oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And I'll never forget, and now this didn't have anything to do with fashion, but, you know, when I was abroad playing professional volleyball, I was in the Netherlands, and we traveled to Bulgaria. And throughout all of our travels, I'm the only Black girl on the team with all tall white women. We're wearing the same uniforms. Every time we traveled to another country, I got detained at the airport, questioned. Why was I here? What was I doing with the team? We go to Bulgaria. I've never been called so many names, from the N-word to monkey to gorilla. And, you know, and it's all just based, and this is me playing, and the crowd is yelling all these derogatory words towards me, you know? And so it does put a bad taste in your mouth, and it's really jarring when you hear it. And again, it wasn't so long ago, you know? And
Yeah.
so people may look at all of us on this panel of educated African American people from we all have different backgrounds, and they may think that we are excluded from the.
We're above it. Yeah.
Yeah, we're above it. Like, oh, but you're successful. Oh, but you own a modeling agency. Therefore, you didn't experience racism. Or you're on TV, so therefore you didn't experience racism. But we probably experienced a lot more because we were breaking into doors that didn't want us, you know?
We're the only ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to be the exception.
Jason, you want to say something?
Well, I think the class issue is very interesting too, because you just mentioned it, but it's like people understanding, they like look at you if like, do you have the money? And even in the fashion industry, working in the fashion industry, you have to meet a certain class standard to get through, especially if you're dark skinned, because you know you can't. So it's just like, and like for me, I had to sell that. Like, I come from old money. My family's had a lot of money for a very long time, and they have definitely bled, fought, and like died for it too. And so, but I also have to like wear that, and that's not something I feel like wearing. You know what I mean? Like that's not.
You have to prove all the time.
You have to prove all the time. And it's not something that you want to have to do. So it does take away any sort of feeling of safety whatsoever, especially if you work in the industry and you go into a store and you don't feel safe in the store. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
that makes no sense. And so,
or even something as simple as I had a coworker tell me a few years ago, oh, you don't sound Black, you don't sound African. You know, that must be because of your education and because of your family and because of your history and blah, 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 and making excuses for your proximity to them and your closeness to them and separation from Blackness because you don't sound or act or carry yourself the way that they perceive Black people too. And in a weird way, like to your point, Jason, there is a performance of that, you know, code switching. There is a performance of you act a certain way at work or in certain groups because that's how you break through those doors. It's how you get your foot, you know, one foot up the ladder at all times. It's how you do that.
Speaking
and
of,
how does that? Sorry. I wanted to ask a question. How does that make you guys feel now, right? With everything happening with the movement, because that code switching is, I mean, that's our survival mechanism, right? And so you and I can relate to each other more so because both being African, coming to this country, not having the African accent, and then not sounding Black, exactly, and then not sounded Black enough. And so I've had those same comments from my white friends. Oh, but you sound good and you talk well. And they mean it with all sincerity because they're like, I like you more because you're not
like
Black.
them.
Yeah. And so I think that also adds to the racism, that why they put us in that pocket of you must not experience racism because this is what I think. You're not like the other Black people that experience racism because they're lower income or whatever negative feelings they have about them. And so it's also made me kind of reevaluate myself and how I want to behave. And is code switching necessary anymore? And do I have to conform and change to make them comfortable? So now I'm in a position where, you know what? I've been uncomfortable for 44 years of my life. Your turn. I'm passing the buck to them now.
That's a good point. That's such a good point.
But like to kind of shift, because this
Gabby's like, let's stay with
because the industry has kind of been in performance, and now you kind of see this in a way like this code of like, this is how you respond to racism as a fashion brand. You respond via social media with a Black square and a statement. What's a different response that they could take on? And Brian, I want to hear from you on this.
What was that again?
What's a different what would be a better response from the industry beyond social media and a simple, apology statement?
I mean, I was gonna say like, I don't know, like I'm just so like filled up because it's like I'm getting inspired by you all's like statements and stuff. And I don't know, I feel like we just have to like speak up. I know like for me, like I came from like a background of, like people are so reserved and I'm not used to be speaking up in public spaces and stuff. And I'm always behind the camera. So like just speaking up for one. But just, putting pride into our culture, like we're dope. And we have a lot of creatives that are within our space. Like I met so many people along my short journey into the industry that are, shoe designers. I didn't even know that people design shoes, even Black like designers that design shoes. And I just interviewed one last week. But we're so creative in all spaces. But I would just say like be more vocal and don't hold anything back. Everyone has said that across the board as well in their statements.
Yeah. So you kind of hit on something, just kind of the space, because we've relied on Vogue magazine, Harper's Bazaar, just kind of the whole Condé Nast empire to kind of direct our views on fashion and to be the platform that gives us, the update on what's in, what's not in, and all that good stuff.
Use each other too.
Yeah,
like, a lot of people. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'll just finish this part. Should the industry make space? Should we look towards new media platforms and businesses, or can we do we just stick to the regular and expect them to change?
I don't feel like we should reset what we already have. Like we should I would say be more collective with each other, like collaborate more. Because even when I moved here, like I just was in that mindset of like, oh, I'm trying to be in my own lane. I'm just trying to, get the things done that I want to get done. And if someone want to go on this journey, then they do. If they don't, then they don't. But I had to shift that mindset quickly because I was like, I wasn't advancing. And I'm like, the next person to me, they know more. They may know a little bit more about a particular project or something than I would know, or I would know something more than they would know. So we just help each other out. And so that's how I've been advancing in the industry. Even my friends, like I had to just make a whole shift with that. Like if you wasn't on the same mindset, then peace, you're out. But I think just use each other because we have it.
Yeah.
And I think you were talking about, do we rely on those established sources to build the fashion community, or do we continue to build our own, as we had the Ebony Fashion Fair and Essence Hip Hop and all that. And that's a hard question in itself too, because there is a part of me that feels like we need to continue to build our own. And we have to remember why Black people created their own things to begin with. Everything that Black people ever did was a direct reaction or response to being excluded from anything white, when they said, oh no, Black people, you can't have this. So we went and created our own. That's why BET is there, because they weren't playing Black artists and Black fashion and anything like that in the mainstream. That's why we had Ebony Fashion Fair, because that highlighted Black models and gave them a chance to go around the country and performing. Essence Magazine, it's about hearing Black voices. So we've always had to create our own narrative to get it out there and speak to ourselves. So in a perfect world, I would love it to merge and there shouldn't be that separation, right? But I also find more comfort now with everything that's going on. I have to speak really honestly about it. I'm a Black person that my entire life has been in the white community, right? So in my introduction, I mentioned my father being murdered. After he was murdered, my family moved to an all-white town called Harrisonburg, Virginia, which we had no idea what it was about. It was
you did.
Yeah,
you did.
The lawyers that handled our case actually fell in love with my family, and so they were like, "Hey, go here." They helped pay our tuition. Three of my siblings and I's tuition to a private high school, private Christian high school, Mennonite high school. I was like, "What the hell is a Mennonite?" All right, first of all.
Ooh.
So, right? So
yeah.
Here
I had a Mennonite Christian roommate once.
Yeah, so there you go. And so here you have, there's 4 of us siblings in the family, but here you have 3 of us now being dumped into this all white environment, brand new religion or group of religious people. And then, so I've always had a lot of white friends. I went to a predominantly white university. I got a full scholarship to play volleyball, which was an all white sport. I chose George Mason because it was out of all the schools that recruited me, they had the most Black athletes on the team. They had a Black head coach and a Black athletic director. So I was trying to get my Blackness in the small pockets that I could get. So I will say, as much as I feel as though I have given to the white community, even including my code switching and trying to always knowing that I have to present myself and disarm them to say, hey, I'm good, I'm safe, I'm not a thief, I'm not bad, I'm not this. But I've been highly disappointed in their reaction over the years, and especially in this time. So I have made more of a conscious effort now, especially with the George Floyd movement. It's not that I wasn't protesting, I wasn't down for the cause and everything else. I have cried with every other Black person. I have been sad, I've been angry, I've been every other emotion. But this one, I think that has sparked a movement in everyone's hearts. It's made me realize I need to do more in my community. I need to do more to put on Black people and give them opportunities, because I have busted my butt and gone through all the racism to get to where I am. And I have a small platform and where I can bring on assistants that are Black. I can bring on interns that are Black. I can pick and choose who I decide to work with. I can put designers on when I'm doing fashion segments. And so I focus on, if I'm doing a Fox 5 segment, you know what, let me find some Black designers that I can help promote and do that too. So I know I'm rambling, but as much as I want the things to merge, I think there is some beauty in us recognizing that, as you said, Brian, Black people are dope. A lot of the things we do are dope, and we have to continue to build that. I'm not saying we can't merge it with what white America or what is deemed the best, but we can then create the best for us too. So
I was gonna say about showrooms too, like being in those type of spaces, because a lot of showrooms that I've been to, whether in like LA or even like the New York areas, like I don't see a lot of Black people in those spaces. When I go to Atlanta, they're everywhere. So I would just say, like, be more active in those type of spaces as well, or create our own show.
Yeah.
And
I just want to say, like, everything that you said really resonates with me personally. Like, I went to an all-white boarding school. I went to college in Vermont.
That's whitey white. No, sorry.
I'm not gonna expand on it, but like everything you said just like touched me right here, and I feel that something that's, to bring it back to the fashion industry, I think something that's really, we have to be really mindful of and really aware of is this scarcity mentality. And it's in the fashion industry, but it's in society as a whole, which is this feeling of there can only be one of us. There can only be one Naomi Campbell. Can't have 5 of them. There can only be one Virgil Abloh, and when we're done with him, we're gonna bring a new person in, and it's not both. And I think that mentality really, we have to be mindful of it, because it really works to sustain the current power structure and to prevent Black people, but my other communities in general, from amassing clout, culture, relevance. It prevents us from uniting and from creating.
You're right. I wanted to say as well, all of you guys have touched on this, but it's also, I think, about ownership of your own work. Ownership of the work when you collaborate with other people. I'm a firm believer in both sides of building our foundation and a solid foundation in our own communities, but also being able to build outside of our communities. But that happens when you're not an employee outside our communities, but owning the work outside our communities.
Yeah.
I learned that recently last year at a very great opportunity by planning and executing the Hirshhorn Ball for the Hirshhorn Museum. It was like their first kind of like Met Gala ever ball.
Oh, I was so mad I missed that.
It was really fun.
I know, I saw it. Damn it.
I mean, like, my Black femme gay butt had full like carte blanche over this entire event from like January through. So you know what I mean? Like the theme, the planning, who was hired. I hired all my Black friends. I did. I was just like, I'm hiring only Black people. Like, I mean, just like I went to town and I stood there in a room of some of the wealthiest people in the world who are the donors. I mean, like von Schlappenflavens and like all those kinds of people, and literally said to them, you have been buying into modern art, the Picassos and all of this, but they are in the past. Modern art is Black and it is queer, and this is what your investment is going to. And they got it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
yes,
for me,
Jason.
that was a moment of really establishing and jumping in and going into the establishment and bulldozing and then allowing something beautiful to grow. And I think that's the thing, that's the bad image of Black people, that we just destroy. And we don't actually destroy. We always grow. Like every time we are knocked down in the 20s, in the 30s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, we always come back and grow better. And
in 2020, no.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, those were all the massacres, girl. All the massacres. There was
The only thing we know how to do.
But that's what we do.
Rebuild.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of building, and you guys tapped on this briefly, but you know, we did have Ebony Fashion Fair, which was the way for the Black community to connect to high fashion. I mean, I had a cousin that met his third wife at an Ebony Fashion Fair show. But
That's the
third one.
His third wife. That was so shady. Oh my God.
Right.
it was his third, but not his last. But we had Baby Fat and FUBU, and we had all these brands in our own world. And then it kind of just seemed like it slipped away at some point. Where did the fashion industry, I guess, or maybe where did it go wrong in a way? Like, because we were kind of pushing our identity through the fashion industry, and then it just seemed like we kind of stopped.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, because I'm way too excited. I'm just way too excited. So I'm just like, that's what I'm sorry to apologize, but and I was going to say that this is a historical answer, and the historical thing is that from the get-go, from what we have now as the current modern world, or the modern Western world of fashion and beauty, those standards were always European. And historically, even with Black fashion, even Ebony Fashion Fair, those were all European designers for the first part. Those are the roots. That it was European white designers designing and having Black people wear their clothes, and wealthy Black people were able to buy them. And even in the wealthy Black world, it was still modeled after a white, Western, European structure. And so for Ebony Fashion Fair, when it started to die off, in my opinion, that world started to become archaic for Black people experiencing fashion today and how we experience today. We don't really see that archaic world anymore of what Ebony Fashion Fair was. Not saying that wasn't important, because it was very important. It was vital. It was one of my most amazing moments of my life when it comes to learning about fashion, because I got to go. But fashion now, especially in the hands of African Americans, Africans of the diaspora, it's not necessarily about us wearing white designers. It's about us wearing our clothes, telling our stories, and giving that gift to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wonder if it had anything to do with, you know, again, going back to who's making the decisions on what fashion is, right? And so remember when Polo was huge and they had, what's his name? Who was the big Black male model? Tyson, thank you, you know? And so
Or Tommy
that
Hilfiger with Leah.
The only
exactly.
black
Right. And so when they start making it so that the Polos and the Tommy Hilfigers and those people that started to try to do more urban wear and making their brands more, oh, well, this is a white brand, you got to buy this. And I feel like they've made it so that if you want to be somebody or have that status, you have to wear these high-end designer brands, you know? Because even going back to when we were all talking about how we feel when we go shopping, I always think like there are times when I'll go shopping and, you know, we've all had our splurge items and our splurge designer pieces, right? And when I got my first Chanel bag, I felt like, oh, I've arrived. Now people will accept me. I can go to a white event or I can go to a store and I'll have my Chanel bag and they'll know I dropped a couple G's on this bag, right?
Yes.
But, you know what I'm saying? It's a status symbol. And even as messed up as it is, you know, because I don't want to focus on the riots during this protest, because I always say the riots are a reaction to the protest, you know, when you didn't listen to us. And again, we also know it wasn't Black people that were doing all the riots. But when they would show videos of people running into these high-end designer stores that they were breaking into in New York and stealing, that is a system, a problem with the system that makes it so that people feel, in order to feel accepted in this world and in this community, I have to have that. So I have to go break into that store and get designer things instead of going to like a Target or something and getting things that I actually may need in my real life, you know? Like go get some food or something, right? So, but I feel like, again, it goes back to the class system, you know? It's just that they have made it so that their things are better, and everything about essence is or the essence of the Black community and the things that we produce is not as good. And I've seen that happen time and time again. And also, as a stylist that has styled a lot of celebrities, one of the things that is always so disheartening to me, this past January before COVID hit, I had this opportunity where I styled all the legends of Urban One, right? Kathy Hughes, I'm sure every single one of you guys know exactly. But I bet you a lot of white people that are listening to this panel have no idea who Kathy Hughes is. They have no idea who D.L. Hughley, L.B. Shore, Ricky Smiley, all of these people. So I styled all of these major names. And every time I told this story to my white friends, they were like, oh, I've never heard of them. Oh, no, I don't know. And it just deflated everything that I just did, which was so huge and actually one of the pinnacles of my styling career. But every time I talked to a Black person, they were like, girl, your reactions is the exact reactions that I got.
Right.
Yes.
I haven't heard that name in a long time.
Yes. And y'all, I'm about to style him in 2 months for another photo shoot. So, you know, so it's things like that where white America has diminished our voices and our people because they're not mainstream, you know, and they're mainstream in our world. And that's why we have, again, our magazines, our TV shows, our radio shows, because our voices are not allowed to be heard in the mainstream. So I think that whole thing, all of that is wrapped into one.
It is. Well, also too, I mean, it's just a history in general, Western history and the history that we're taught is taught in proximity to whiteness, bottom line. And that is what the issue at the end of the day is. It's in proximity to whiteness. When we were talking about code switching, it's in proximity to whiteness and us proving how close we are. You know what I mean? And so I think, and that is the huge issue, is that, you know, like Ebony Fashion Fair and Essence Magazine, they still did it in proximity to whiteness, in my opinion. As amazing as established they are or were, and believe me, again, they are very near and dear to my heart, and I feel their contribution. So I would never disrespect and say, oh, they weren't important, but they still had to adhere to that because that's where America was at the time. You know, hip hop in terms of like hip hop fashion, in terms of like Baby Phat and FUBU, they went against the grain, but they only got but so far.
Yeah.
You know, so and so it's all about this proximity to whiteness and whether you can pass the bar. I mean, like, look at Beyonce. Can she get more blonde?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
They start off that color when she first started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the full shebang was not that shade of brown. So like,
remember when she used to wear lip gloss? Like,
yeah, you know, like one of
that
my
was like the
favorites-
blackest thing about Beyonce in the 90s.
And I no one's
Right.
a hard Beyonce fan that I'm offending, and I love her, but also at the same time, I do notice these things that like for instance, in Lemonade, she does Formation. Formation's amazing. Everyone's behind it. It's this huge anthem, especially for Black women. Yet, as an anthem for Black women, why do you have blonde cornrows? You know what I mean? Like, that is, and if you want to say, oh, I can do whatever I want to as a Black woman, I get you, but you have responsibility as an artist now. You know what I mean? You're putting out a message. And if you're saying that, and no matter what, if our proximity to whiteness makes us as good as you, then we're okay.
Yep.
And that's not okay. You just completely bashed the rest of your entire album that you did.
Agreed.
And so, you know, we
I could not agree more.
We do.
I could not agree more if I tried. I think something else we have to the essence of the FUBU and even the Beyonce question or the Beyonce statement. I think we have to understand or keep in mind that whiteness is also, sorry, it's my cat. Whiteness is a synonym for power, which powers capitalism. You know, if Essence and FUBU and Baby Fat and all of these brands are able to be successful outside of the white system, that starts to erode the power structure and the money and the economics of white capitalism. And I think we cannot, that's why Tulsa happened. Like, we can't allow Essence to be successful. That's why we have a scarcity mentality. That's what, like, it is, I think it's all really connected.
Yeah, this conversation could go on for ever. But let's open it up to the audience, because I know some people have some questions. Let's see. Joelle, let's see. Did you receive any questions?
Yeah, I think Christophe has a question. Can you, Christophe? And then Lola has a question. Okay. Christophe, can you unmute yourself? Gabby, can you? Yeah, here we go.
Hi. So first, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Hi, Jason. Nice to see you. So I had a question with regards to Black Lives Matter, and just in general, there's a lot of momentum of people. Like, for example, I was on this call today at work, and basically it was just like a sharing moment for everybody to talk about their own personal experiences with racism. And I mean, the thing is that, like, I feel like there's this huge upswell and a lot of momentum for people wanting to talk about racism, to start searching within, kind of doing a self-check to sort of see if there's something wrong or not quite right or something that they have to fix and whatnot. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are willing to want to talk about racism, whether it's in a very open environment or in a closed environment, or confronting it, or finally saying something against it. I'm wondering, in your opinion, do you think fashion in some ways can kind of be a way to give people a signal that you still want to keep the discussion going? That this isn't just gonna kind of like, blow over once all the protests are done, that this is something that really is lasting and that people really want to continue the dialogue, because this thing isn't just going to go away,
and it shouldn't.
And this is like a generations long effort that I think will require people to sort of take it into their dinner tables, and when they go home for their Thanksgiving dinner and whatnot, and having that awkward discussion. And I feel like in some ways, through fashion, whether it's like a pin or a color or an accessory or something, it can kind of start that discussion going, even if, say, for example, a Black person is not around.
Yeah. I want to answer too. I think fashion has always been a trendsetter when it comes to movements. Fashion has always spoken to someone. Just like Jason, you said, when you were growing up and you were the gayest gay, you know? So you used your fashion to express yourself. So it was almost a body armor, but it was always like, hey, y'all, I'm gay and I'm proud, you know? And then, and even when I would go to New York Fashion Week and I'm watching the runways, and a couple years ago, when there was a huge focus on having, there was a lot of guys walking in designers who were making women's clothing. So there was that whole cross-pollination of the androgynous and the mixing, right? You remember that? And so I think fashion has a duty to speak up and to talk about the movement, the same way music has a duty, because now I'm hearing more, you know, especially when it comes to Black people, I'm hearing more in our music now. We are always resonating with what's going on in the world. You take it back to even Marvin Gaye when he sang about what's going on. He was singing about that movement. The way he was dressing was about that movement. So I agree with you. And I think, Christophe, that fashion should always be a leader, because it's kind of an unpolitical way, but a way to be political without having to make a statement. You know, you can say what's going on. When I wear today I'm wearing my sweatshirt made in Africa. That is me telling you where I'm made. And from that, you're going to deduct, okay, she's a proud African, she's a proud Black woman, she's a proud whatever. And so I more so now want my clothing to reflect the messaging that I'm trying to say too, which is, you know, moving away from shying away from who I am total as a Black woman, because I'm more than just a Black woman. You know, there's so many. I'm an African woman, I'm an athlete, I'm a model, I'm owner of a modeling agency. I have so many hats that I wear that my clothing is going to speak to that. And I do hope that a lot of designers step up and are making clothes that actually speak to the movement that's happening right now.
Well, Christophe, it also kind of feeds into the sustainable fashion movement in a way of asking, well, why do you like this piece of clothing beyond just the way it looks or the fact that some magazine told you that it's the next hot thing, you know, like tying into like, well, do you like what message it's putting out there, or can you even say where it was made or who made it, or, you know, just kind of going to the story and the deeper depths of clothing, because now, like we mentioned on the panel, fashion is a lifestyle. You know, clothes do express some kind of story or kind of lifestyle, you know, so it's like, like when you look at it and you're asking, it's like it's a deeper dive into ourselves. Like, why do I like this? You know, what does it say about me? What part of me enjoys this sweater? Almost, you know. Jason, were you gonna say something?
Also, I think you just touched on it, Joy, but there's also a sense of fearlessness that people should have nowadays when it comes to our clothes. We talked about this idea of code switching as a Black person, and how, you know, and not just as a Black person, as a person of color, you know, like the Western world is from our proximity to whiteness. So if you want to get away from that, not being afraid to express yourself, to wear your hair long, or to wear it, you know, fully natural, or to, you know, like wear bold colors, or to, you know, like experiment with your, you know, your native ethnicity that you have found out somehow, you know what I mean? Like, and so, you know, like having that fearlessness, not just with the words, but having that, I know for me, how I've always been able to communicate being Black, gay, femme, and full of romanticism and everything like that is by how I just dress and carry myself. And it's funny enough, a lot of people don't know this, but Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement, if you ever notice a lot of the pictures, everyone looks dressed to the nines, as if, oh, everyone just wore suits back in the day.
Right? Are you serious, Coretta?
That was an actual calculated move. Yeah, that was a calculated move that they promoted. Like, we want people to know that Black people are beautiful, that we are clean, that we're not dirty, that all this other stuff that people were saying about Black people. And so he's just like, if you show up to a protest, show up in a suit, show up Sunday back. And that's why they did what they did. And that's how they really got that message across. So fashion always has and will get that message across.
Lola has a question. Lola, would you like to share your question?
Yes. Thank you so much to everyone. It's been really interesting. I wanted to touch base on, first of all, like the notion of like slavery and cheap labor, basically like the economic reasons why, you know, slaves were brought from Africa to the Americas, you know, cheap labor, and how we can see that in the cheap labor that is sort of like the base of the fast fashion industry, and how it is basically modern day slavery, and how, you know, you guys as like, you know, people in the industry, how like the way I see race and fashion was first like as an economic aspect. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on that, and how we can, you know, strive for better work.
I actually did a fashion panel on sustainability not too long ago, and this question came up as well. And I'm very passionate about this subject as well, because it really is absolutely disturbing. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about it. One, slaves, yes, were brought to America for labor. Bottom line, not just because they were Black, it was for labor. The Blackness came when they tried to create whiteness, so that the white people would police the Black people, and so on and so on and so forth. And the industrialism of slavery then is very reminiscent of the industrialism of what's happening in labor overseas now, not even just, and also in this country, but especially overseas. Right. And I think one of the things that we really need to do is, and it's very hard to do, I'm about to say something very like, you know, utopian world. But one thing that I think needs to happen is that there needs to be more discussion on the regulation of the development of textiles. There's regulation on labor, yes, obviously hasn't done anything, but the development of textiles, there's no regulation on that. And that's what puts people in a really bad position. So you have these factories where you don't have to actually like produce them in a safe way necessarily. They're destroying not just the factory workers, but the entire environment around them. Like the cotton factories and plantations out in India and in Asia, and they are completely decimating whole ecosystems. There was a sea at one point near Kazakhstan where ship barges would travel on. That sea is now a puddle on the map. It is a small, little, dry puddle because the amount of cotton factories surrounding it have sucked up all of the water, because cotton is the one crop that needs the most water to grow, you know what I mean? And so regulations on what textiles to grow, cotton should have never been grown on an industrial global level like we're growing it now. That was never supposed to happen. So those kinds of things that we utilize and that we're utilizing, we should honestly, in my opinion, boycott. I mean, we should boycott cotton as Black people for many reasons. Right. But, you know, it's things that we should try to boycott. However, because these are
boycott cotton now.
Right? But because these are huge, big box companies, how do you boycott something that they've made us dependent on? It's about the policies and of creating policies that actually like regulate and stop them from producing things that are completely harmful to the environment, that make people dependent then on these jobs.
Wow, no, I loved it.
I feel like Jason just like dropped the mic.
Boom.
One Jason thing, for president.
Yeah. One thing I want to add, which I feel like what you just said, Jason, needs no edits or additions. Let's just like remember everything you said and just copy paste it everywhere. like you Joy, Jason talked about why, like you asked the question, Gabby, like what made you get into fashion, like what makes you love fashion. And I actually remember I went to this exhibit at the Met Museum with Joelle like four years ago now, maybe, called Manus and Machina, which is Man and Machine. And I still have this book. And I think one of the things that was so incredible about fashion in the beginning was the combination of self-expression and man making a beautifully detailed couture, like what can we do with our hands? And the elaborate, intricate nature of just clothes making, which to me ties back to like my experience as a Ghanaian growing up and my own proximity to the clothes. And for me, the fast fashion industry is basically not like, it's just taking so much away from what fashion actually means. And it's just, I mean, I'm getting so heated. I can't even find my words, and my cat agrees. But I think that it's just like investing in that fast fashion industry just takes so much away from what fashion was, why it was created, what it was meant for, how, like, I think about those early New York, like Paris and New York fashion shows where it was literally in someone's apartment and you just had people walking back and forth, and it was so small scale. Clothes were not made to be mass produced. I genuinely believe that. It was, that's not what we were meant to be doing. Just like cotton isn't meant to be grown on a global scale at the quantity that we're growing it in.
And you realize that there's a pattern in history about this, because, you know, slavery got bad for slaves during the invention of the cotton gin.
Yeah.
You know, when they needed to mass produce and make more products.
Eli Whitney.
Yes, exactly. And so you see that same theme with fast fashion, is now that they're doing all this fast fashion and mass producing, it's creating all these that poor working conditions for people. And it's a new form of slavery. So it is a consumer problem, you know, and it's how do you get to the masses to make them feel the way that we feel about fashion, and to make them see the true damage that fast fashion is, because it's never going to be good for anybody. And as long as there's a demand in that, changing it is going to be hard, because clearly the government is not going to regulate it, because greed, everything boils down to greed. Racism, you know, everything bad boils down to greed. And I'm gonna tell you a side story about this real quick. This doesn't really relate, but it shows you the greed. I have a good friend, she's Korean. I have a lot of Asian friends, right? And the part that I've been doing in this whole process is I've been reaching out to my friends, my white friends, my Asian friends, all my others, and I've been directly asking them to step up, to say something, to do something. And I've been giving them a safe space to speak. So I got together with 3 of my Asian girlfriends, and one of the Korean girl, her father owns, they own liquor stores and dry cleaner stores, right? Not to be stereotypical, but that's where their wealth has come from. So I've always heard her tell stories to me about, you know, oh, I saw this black guy, and, you know, this black guy hit me. And it's not that she's being racist, but I know where the tone is coming from and what she's trying to say. So she was actually making a nice comment this time and saying that she went to the grocery store, and a big black guy was wearing a mask, and he went out of his way to say hello and smile to her, because he was pushing his cart behind her so that she would be relaxed and not be afraid. And she was like, I felt really bad for that. So she started talking about her father's experiences with black people were all negative. So she's like, well, you know, my family has a negative view of black people because of what they experience at their liquor stores. Well, guess where their liquor stores are? Their liquor stores are in the poor black communities. So they're getting that type of traffic in there. And so she said, you know, they come into the store and they're rude and then this, that, and the other. And my father's afraid of them. So I asked her, I said, well, then why did your father put a liquor store in a community of people that he's afraid of? And she paused for a second, and she was about to answer before she answered. And I said, greed and money. So your father is willing to take money from the black community, and he's willing to put his liquor store in the black community and poison the black community, but he's afraid of those same people, but not afraid to take their money. So that just goes to the whole point that when it comes to money and it comes to greed, people are always going to do do the worst thing. So how do we attack that, you know?
Yeah.
And that was a real interesting point for me when her and I talked about that. And I was like, wow, that opened my eyes to just how huge greed is and how racism may never go away, because people make money off of racism. Even when they just did the BET Awards and they aired it on CBS. And yes, I was glad that they aired it on a primetime channel, but CBS did that because they knew they were going to make money from all the advertising, all the things that come in, and CBS now owns BET.
Joy, you don't even have to go that far. Like literally, the majority of Black bodies in sports.
Yes.
You mean all of sports?
Period.
Right.
Just all the sports.
All of them.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So
All of them.
Well, there's a really amazing documentary series about Reconstruction that Henry Louis Gates did last year.
Oh my God, I love that show. Y'all should all watch it.
I do the same. I tell everyone to watch it. It's the most amazing thing ever, because we always glaze over Reconstruction. And so, you know, these issues with labor, which was the original question, that is addressed in Reconstruction, how that switched over from a slave nation into an industrial nation still utilizing slave labor, and how that gets globalized in those roots. And one of the things that Louis Gates also says, though, he's just like, Black people created American culture. Bottom line. He was just like, we create the food.
There is no American culture without Black people.
Without Black
There's
people,
zero.
yeah. He was just like, we create the food, we create the music. He was just like, all roots of music come from Black people in America that are popular roots of music. He was just like, all the food was created by slaves, not by the white masters. So it's just like, we created American culture. That's not every single thing. No, we didn't do apple pie. I'm pretty sure we may have, but you know,
I'm so done with you.
But what I'm saying is that what I always say, because again, I'm a historian, and I always put this out there, especially about learning, especially through fashion and learning about the history of fashion. Learn all of it, and for people to understand all of it, to understand not just who this design is, but what the labor is, where these clothes are coming from, who had to die to get this t-shirt, this $5 t-shirt on your back, and is that actually necessary? And the funny thing is that information is actually very readily out there and very easy to have, not even to find. It's sitting right there in your face. We just tend to glaze over it because we're looking at the price tag. Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is price tag really tells you a lot about how much was not spent on labor and how much labor has been used. If it's really cheap and it's mass marketed, hundreds of people have been working on that and none were paid a goddamn dime.
Yeah.
I think we have one last question.
No!
Joelle, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have actually two questions. But we can go on with you guys. But okay, just quickly, because I think that point on fashion education is very, very important. And yes, Jason, you touched on that fashion history is taught through Western eyes. When we talk about African clothing or African textile, is mostly in the context of costumes or textile studies. Basically, it's always like a box there. So is there a need to review the books? We also talk, when we talk about Africa, we talk about post-colonialism. So going back to the cotton, and we talk about decolonizing the fashion industry, which we touched upon with Lola's question too. But so that's my first question: is there a way to revisit fashion history book, or should we dedicate one class? And I think Parsons is doing that. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Parsons alumni, but there's a class called Fashion and Race where you have to, I think that this is, is it the question of like going back to the history of fashion and tying it, because obviously the first dress did not come out of the West, it came out of Africa, actually from Egypt. So is there a need to do that? And my second question is, who today, as a brand or a designer, is a good example of someone that is doing something good, answering those questions of, fashioning fashion through race? Is there someone that is doing a good job?
I would say I want to answer the first question. I think for the fashion education, especially for the history, and we had this conversation earlier when you were in DC, but when I was talking about the Civil War, it's about the language, I think. I think the language is the most important thing. we need to start changing the language and looking at these words and using the synonyms. If someone conquered, they actually just killed a bunch of people. Like, we need to like use the proper language on what it is. Fashion or African costuming is not costumes, it's clothes. They're not wearing costumes, they're wearing clothes. Because then you have this whole idea of Africans only do ceremony, and the only time they leave their huts is when they come out for a ceremony, and they go back in, never see them again, and they're all really skinny and they need our food. And so like that, again,
with flies on their face.
Yeah, with flies on their faces. But again, that's because of the language. It's because of the words being used. You know what I mean? Like, those things need to change. And so when it comes to resources, you really have to look at a lot of resources, and you have to be able to start putting things together. You know, looking at, like, for instance, if you're looking at France in the 1780s, Marie Antoinette, star of the French Revolution, so much information. Well, there's information about what happened all over the rest of the world during the 1780s as well as Africa. You know what I mean? So if you're interested, look up, start with the Google search, Africa, 1780s. The information is out there. And I think that's the most important thing is, if you want to know, just look it up. There's nothing better I love.
There are so many resources.
Yeah, there's nothing better I love than fact checking when I'm like watching historical shows. Like, because I just want to know. Like,
and I wish more people wanted to know, and especially with this movement, you know, I've been, again, going back to just my upbringing and being in a position of being around a lot of white people, a lot of Asians, around a lot of others. So I'm their one Black friend, you know, so I'm that exhausted Black friend that always has to teach, or they're asking me, hey, Joy, you know, what about this? And what should I read? What should I do? And I'm just like, Google, man.
You have the internet.
Google and YouTube is your mother and your father. You know what I mean? Like, they will always be there for you. And so I think it's important for people to do their research on everything, to know the history. So even when I'm trying to teach them, I'm like, go back to the beginning, because you have to understand where it came from, where the fight came from. So even when we talk about race in America, if you don't understand or know the stories about all the massacres, like Rosewood Massacre, I mean, just God, every story, Tulsa, all of these things. If you don't understand the pain and the anger of the Black community having to be rebuilt after they've been conquered and murdered and hurt, and all of these, and even when you get to Reconstruction, and when you get to the Jim Crow era, and when you get to Obama being a Black president, and everyone thinking that racism just magically disappeared when it didn't. But if you understand the root of the problem, if you understand the root of fashion, it will help you in everything that you're doing today. The problem with Americans, and the problem with white Americans, is that they don't want to do the homework. When you were born and raised into a country where privilege, you were born into privilege, you were born into white supremacy, your everyday life is normal, you know? When you can hear people say the things that they're saying, because they've never had to think otherwise. They've never had to have a conversation about, oh, if I go there, that might not be good. I love country music. There, I said it, right? So I'm a huge country music fan. My
country music is Black music. Why you feel bad about that?
Right.
Most country music is Black.
Because I've been made to feel bad. But you know what's really jacked up right now? I haven't been to a country concert in 2 years. Because with everything going on in race relations, I don't feel safe there anymore.
Yeah.
And I will not go anymore, because my husband always teases me. He's like, why do you like their music? They don't like you. They don't love you. And I'm like, no, they're not all racist. They're not all bad, you know? But it's, but it's like, those are the things that we have to change. And so I think that in order for the fashion industry to change, for race relations to change in this country, people have to do their homework. It has to go beyond the surface of what you see. It has to go beyond Black people being a trend. It has to go beyond, oh, well, that Black designer is doing something, let me go buy it. I'm seeing that happening so much now, with everyone wanting to buy Black and support Black, and that's great. And yes, do I want to benefit from that? Hell yes. If you want to hire my models because I'm a Black person running an agency, please by all means do it. But why are you doing it? You know, you're doing it because you believe in what I'm doing, or you're doing it because you truly want to see change, or you're doing it because you want to be cool and seen as someone who is down for the cause, you know? So it's like, really do your homework.
I think also it's a job of, especially with fashion studies and fashion design. It's a job of universities to add that to their curriculum and teach, you know, because it's not a Western. There's a lot of, you know, it's also Asian, it's also African, it's also Arab. It's, you know, I think it started way before the West. So I think it's the job of universities to also add this to their curriculum. And then my second question, do you think there is anyone that is doing a good job? And if there is, who is that designer or that brand?
I would say personally Pierre Moss.
I was gonna say Pierre Moss as well.
Okay.
I was gonna say Pierre Moss as well. One of the things that I do want to go back to a point that Jason made, but one of the things that I love about Pierre Moss is the inclusive nature of his brand, rather than having models that he works with. One of his philosophies is he opens up his showroom and he invites anyone from the community to come in, and those are his models. Those are his models. He doesn't use models that we know or have a certain look. It's just like you're walking down the street and you happen to go across the showroom and he takes photos of you and you end up on the website. He also tells stories in his clothes. You know, one of my favorite pieces of his is a Sankofa bird, which is from Ghana, which is a huge part of my upbringing, my heritage, and my culture. And he mixes that in with like urban African-American aesthetics. And he actually on the back explains what it means. And it's not just an appropriation of the bird because it's cool and it's graphic. He's like, no, this is from the tree people in Ghana, and this is what it means. I'm gonna go full circle. I love the thoughtfulness of his work, the way that he tries to integrate all the Black diaspora into his work. He works with artists, local artists. Like I just love his work.
I agree.
Each collection is a thesis, and it tells. That's what I like. It's like it's not just like I'm making clothes that people will like. It's clothes that tell a story, and it's a reflection of the time, and it's a reflection of his thought, what's going through his mind. I mean, the man helped put Marquesa together. Like people don't. He's one of the people that too. But like
also a philosopher, like he just
well, you know what's really interesting? Sorry to interrupt you, but you just mentioned something that's really interesting. Pierre Moss helped put Marquesa together. Do you know who the people are that work at the atelier at Chanel? Because they're all Black. They're all African women, and they've been there for like 30 years. You know what I mean? And so again, it goes back to this whole thing of like Black people being there and being silent. And we need to not just be louder, but the industry needs to be better about it. You know what I mean? I will say my favorite designer that I mentioned before is that I love Pier Paolo at Valentino because just seamlessly for the haute couture crowd, for these stuffy, you know, not even just white women, just stuffy women to then just be launched into dark skin beauty of not just African, which is what the fashion industry uses as their token. It's African American, it's African diaspora, which is another thing that's very important for me, is that it's all of us. It's that even for African Americans, our big features, our mixed features are now seen as beautiful. Our wide nose are now seen as beautiful. You know what I mean? So like that, I love what he's doing when he does that, for especially in haute couture. So.
Well, I'm sorry I have to wrap up. This has been a great conversation.
I know, right? We could do this all night.
We could keep going.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and thank you, Jacklyn. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Joy, for participating in this conversation. It's been wonderful and really nice to meet you guys. I know you, Jacklyn, but Jason, it's really nice to meet you guys. And
Brian. Yeah, this was so nice.
Yeah, this is a really great conversation. Thank you for the questions too. And thank you for really being engaged.
Thank you, Brian, who left. Thank you, Gabby, for keeping us on track.
Brian who left.
Not letting us.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph.
Bye,
Appreciate it.
Christoph.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Mwah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Fareed. Hi, Fareed.